what is happening, the fundamentals are very clear to us that the entire game plan, the global game plan, has shifted to Asia Pacific. It's no longer in the Atlantic. And this is where the big power rivalry will be seen. And this is where this century will determine whoever is the leading power in the world. To begin with, I do not ascribe to the view that the supremacy of the Americans, which started well after the Second World War, now it was a unipolar world, and thereafter everybody is talking of a multipolar world. The way I see things is that yes, we are between orders, and eventually again we will have something like a unipolar world, perhaps towards the later part of the century. But that is not the subject right now we are touching upon. This was just to emphasize the importance of this region. Now coming to Quad. Quad is basically a quadrilateral dialogue between four nations, which is America, Japan, Australia, and India. Now the genesis, obviously, as General Lodi pointed out, it goes back to 2004, the tsunami which was there. And in this tsunami, these four countries, they could interact with each other at a personal level, and they could do what came to be known as the humanitarian disaster was there of a great magnitude, and they could bring the relief there. So that is where this whole idea basically then was pushed by the Japanese. Shinzo Abe, the prime minister, he was very keen that as a consequence of this tsunami, the relief which was provided by the four nations, there should be a regional security architecture created where these nations come together to provide humanitarian relief. But then obviously this whole architecture went into a lull for a very long period. And actually it got rejuvenated only during the later half of the Trump administration. Now this is where the real action starts. And this is where I want to focus. So it was basically in October 2020 in Tokyo, where there was a ministerial meeting of these four countries. And this is where the then US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, he mentioned about formalizing Quad, and he mentioned about creating a security framework. And this is where for the first time the Americans said that we want to advance free and open rule-based order in the Indo-Pacific, rooted in international law. Now, this is important. A rule-based order. Who will determine the rule-based order? Will it be the United Nations or will it be the US? As of now, it seems that it will be determined by the Americans. And it also seems that even now, there is no clear definition of what exactly this rule-based order means. It has not been defined at all. But so be it. This is what happened towards the end of the Trump presidency. Now, the real action starts with the coming of the Biden administration. What is it all about? Quad is just one of the key elements, but the whole thing is about how to stop the rise of China. It is about that. Now, the Americans are worried that there is a competitor in China in the Asia Pacific region, and this has to be stopped. And so exactly what are they trying to stop? As we all know, the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, it has three elements. It has a land element, which is the Eurasia mass. Now, here the Americans have really no interest in getting into the Eurasia landmass after they have withdrawn from Afghanistan. So this has been left to China, Russia, Turkey, Pakistan, Iran. These are the countries who will create some sort of architecture here. The second thread of the BRI is the Maritime Silk Road. Now, this is critical for the Americans. So what they want to do is they want to constrain the options of the PLA and the Chinese in the Western Pacific. And they want to deny the Maritime Silk Road in the Indian Ocean region. The whole idea is that if a power can be in two nations, it becomes a global power. A power with two-nation navy is a global power. So I repeat once again, to constrain things in the Western Pacific this is one aim. And the second is maritime Silk Road options should be limited or constrained in the Indian Pacific Ocean. Now, there is a third thread also to the Belt and Road Initiative. And the third thread is called the Digital Silk Road. I give a lot of importance to the Digital Silk Road, which is basically the new thing in the cyberspace. Now, what the Chinese are trying to do is the Chinese are taking what is called the retail internet to the industrial internet. This is a big leap of faith. Basically, what this means is that now in the industrial internet, we are talking about, earlier it was information supremacy. Now we are talking of artificial intelligence supremacy. And the key things will be 5G, wireless networks, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, big data, and cloud. I'm giving you that, that round up the big picture. So the whole idea is, how can we deny the maritime Silk Road? Not really deny, constrain the options. And how do we deny technology to the Chinese for their digital Silk Road? So this is the framework. Everything is operating in this framework, in my assessment. Now we come to the nitty-gritties. What is it about? So when the Biden administration came into office, they have really doubled up the efforts. While it is said that this is a bipartisan thing in America today, the challenge of China, which is true, but the Biden administration, the Democrats have put it on the fast track. And this can be explained by the fact that, first of all, in March 2021, which is this year itself, the first virtual summit was held of the Quad. This was the first virtual summit. And within 6 months, in September 2021, the physical summit was also held. Now, this says a lot. When you have two summits within 6 months, you are talking of centrality of the Quad to the Indo-Pacific strategy. Period. This is what you're talking of. Now, when I say Indo-Pacific strategy, what the Americans have done is, in May 2018, they brought India on board. What used to be called the Asia-Pacific strategy or the Pacific PACCOM of the Americans, now is being, in May 2018, it came to be known, it was renamed as the Indo-Pacific Command. The whole idea was to give a centrality to the Indian Ocean region and bring India on board. Now, what we are saying is, this security architecture will cover the Indo-Pacific region and their area of responsibility. Incidentally, that area of responsibility now actually has gone to East Africa also. It has actually expanded so much, their area of responsibility. So within this, there are 5 things happening, which are part of this to secure this architecture and to constrain, as I explained, the maritime Silk Road and the digital Silk Road. So the first thing is that the Biden administration came up with what is called the Pacific Deterrence Initiative. Now, what is this initiative? This initiative is that in the Western Pacific region, where you have these problem of South China Sea going on, where you have the Taiwan Straits, where you have the problem of East China Sea, all these problems are there. The worry of the Americans consistently has been that China has very powerful, what they call anti-access area defense capabilities. And this is what the Chinese call, the Chinese version of A2AD is the counter-intervention strategy. This basically means it involves a lot of missiles, land-based systems, land-based ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, all land-based. And it involves a whole lot of things, the emerging technologies like laser weapons, everything will come in this rubric. The idea is to keep the Americans constrained and to keep them as much away from the Chinese. Now, the worry of the Americans came about once the militarization of the South China Sea reclaimed islands, the islands which were reclaimed by the PLA, by China, they started militarizing it. This is when it was felt by the American military that today, once they have the missiles on these reclaimed island of South China Sea, they will be able to reach as far as Oceania, those 14 countries which are there around Australia. So this will be the reach. And so the first issue that came about was that because now there is a worry about the land-based missiles, two steps have to be taken. What were the two steps? The first step was in 2018, President Trump pulled out of the INF treaty. That was pulled out because it was felt that it was giving advantage to the Chinese, and which it was, because China was never part of that. This was done by the two blocs, the two superpowers during the Cold War. So this was one action. The second action was that there was a need to disperse the assets. Because if the Chinese were to get at one of the American bases, they could destroy their things in one go. So the idea was that instead of having few bases, then there is a need to have diffused assets in so many more bases. So this is what is called the Pacific Deterrence Initiative. This whole thing, that how do we disperse and we then create a deterrence of our own. So the idea was we will have our own hypersonic missiles, we will have land-based cruise missiles, land-based ballistic missiles, and what we will do is we will have them across the dispersed bases. This whole thing is being done to constrain the PLA within the Western Pacific Ocean. This is one thing. Now, the second initiative is what is known as the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, the alliance between Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK, and US. Now, this is basically sharing of intelligence. This becomes very important. And one of the key things which will be shared is where is exactly the technology going? What is the problem with technology is, I'm just digressing to make the point. The problem with technology is that because now the world is entering into the fourth industrial revolution. See, the third industrial revolution was about the digital age, digitizations. Now we are talking of artificial intelligence and data. And the backbone of this fourth industrial revolution will be 5G. And Huawei 5G is by far, it has progressed far than the competitors. It has been adopted by a lot of BRI countries and even countries which are not part of BRI like Hungary. They are also now trying to get on board. So the worry was that if you have more and more countries which adapt the Chinese emerging technology, especially 5G Huawei, then China will set the standards. The worry is China setting the standards, because whichever country sets the standards, then you have to do the interoperability, your routers, your other systems, they have to then conform to the standard which is set by the country which sets the standard. So to deny China setting the standards. So that is what the one part of the intelligence will do. So the next initiative is, what is the Quad itself? Now the Quad, as rightly mentioned by General Lodi, this is key to the whole thing. Why this is key is, I believe this provides the policy framework to the Indo-Pacific strategy of the Americans. And here, India will play a very important role in this strategy. Which is why, as I explained, they changed the name also to Indo-Pacific. But this is a subject which we can perhaps tackle in the question answer session. So Quad is another initiative which is there. Now the next initiative, as again mentioned, was AUKUS, which is the Australia, UK, and US, which is a very recent thing. In any case, they are allies. All these three countries are military allies. So what the Australians have done is that they have cancelled the deal they had for the conventional submarines with the French. And instead, the Americans and the British, they are saying that we will provide you the nuclear powered submarines. Now, you see, this makes a sensational news. But the truth of the matter is, this is not an easy thing at all. Why it is not easy is that even for such something like a nuclear powered submarine for a country even like Australia, to operationalize them will take something like 10 years. Now, what will happen in 10 years? Please, let's understand the robotization of war is happening. As the commercial world is moving into the fourth industrial revolution, the war also is moving. And the war will be robotized. And again, China is in the forefront here, competing with America. So the long and short is, what exactly will be done by a nuclear powered submarine? Will it be crewed? Crew will be there? Will it be manned? And how will the unmanned systems fit with it? What I'm trying to point out is that there are technical, there are operational issues which need to be tackled. So it is not that this deal has been signed and tomorrow they will get and they'll start operating the nuclear submarines. Nothing of that sort will happen. From the American perspective, it is a commitment reinforced by one of their military allies. You see, Australia has a military alliance going back to 1951 with the Americans. So it's a reinforcement of that. Basically, they will now cover the southern part of the Pacific Ocean. This is what the Australia and Oceania, all that area, they will be looking at. So India has the role to play in the Indian Ocean region. So this is basically what we see in all this is what is happening. All the initiatives, as I said, these 5 initiatives taken by the Biden administration, they all are focused on the military aspect. Now, this is where I think they give the upper hand to the Chinese, because Chinese have been smarter. Chinese have commerce, trade, prosperity in the vanguard. And no country, I mean, China can talk to any country, no country will say that, look, I don't want prosperity. Everybody wants prosperity. So now what is the Chinese counter to this? What they are doing? So first of all, they are trying to commercially outflank the Quad through the initiatives of RCEP, which is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, through the recently signed, finalized EU-China Investment Agreement. And now they have also put in an application to join the successor of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, from which the Americans pulled out when the Trump administration came into office. They pulled out from there. So basically, they want to be everywhere. Let's be very clear. Today, China is the largest trading partner in the world. There is no global supply chain which does not have China in it. So all this talk about a second Cold War that the Americans keep talking is all nonsense. It's all baloney. There cannot be, I'm not getting into right now explaining what was the Cold War, what were its attributes, and how this one will be different. This is a subject we can talk another time because it has relevance today. But sticking to the subject that has been given to me, so the first key thing is that they are trying to commercially outflank the security aspects through the BRI. Now, what is the other thing they are doing? Other thing they are doing is that they are in talks with ASEAN. You see, ASEAN was the first, there were 2 countries in ASEAN, Malaysia and Indonesia, which are directly affected. You see, these are the countries which expressed their reservations, their apprehensions the moment this AUKUS deal was announced. Because they said that, look, this will raise the temperatures in our region and we don't want that. And in any case, to put it on record, the annual trade between ASEAN and China today is close to $900 billion, which is a hell of a lot. Their projects their infrastructure projects are being done by the Chinese companies. So obviously they do not want tensions in their area. So the Chinese are in talk with them. The whole idea is to break this whole thing, what the Americans are trying to put together. The third thing is, as we all have heard, yesterday Xi Jinping made the effort to speak with the new Japanese Prime Minister. The new Japanese Prime Minister, she has spoken to him and he has basically spoken about close ties and development projects with Japan. Now, Japan is part of all these things, and Japan has always been, I mean, though it's an ally of the Americans, but it has always been very careful about its trade with China. It will not like to jeopardize its trade with China. So that is the next thing that they have done. Next, what the Chinese are doing is they are strengthening, as part of the BRI, they are strengthening their security arrangements, which are in the form of cooperation, collaboration. Cooperation is bilateral. For example, between China and Pakistan. Collaboration is multilateral, like SCO. That is collaboration. Next, what they have done is they have strengthened or they are strengthening their military, strategic, and technical cooperation with Russia. Next, what they have done is, see, these are those very carefully crafted countermeasures. But they do not head-on collide with the American security structure. So this itself, a possibility of a war is ruled out. So next, what they have done is, if you recall in 2017, when the first BRI forum was held in Beijing under chairmanship of Xi Jinping, that is the time the UN Secretary General had formally accepted that the Sustainable Development Goals, which is it's a UN project, which is basically providing it is a huge project which started in 2014 and it will continue till 2030. And this will provide a lot of money and to the developing and less developed nations. So it was officially endorsed by the UN Secretary General that the BRI should be assimilated with the Sustainable Development Goals. That means they have actually gone into the United Nations. See the irony of the whole thing. The irony of the whole thing is that the Americans have created the UN after the Second World War. And it is now the Chinese who are basically playing a big role in the UN. This whole security architecture of the Americans is outside the UN. But the Chinese are involving the UN. For example, Chinese are the second largest contributors in terms of finances to the UN after the Americans. But, and here is the but, they have always paid their dues on time, which cannot be said of the Americans. Then the Chinese have announced that we have a standing force of 8,000 soldiers for the UN peacekeeping. They have kept it there. So basically, they are also working through that. Now, in any case, they have a special relationship with Pakistan. I don't have to dwell on that, but I am absolutely certain that if Pakistan, this is my assessment, don't take it amiss, if Pakistan can get its politics correct you have prosperity in your hand. This is the way I see it. You can do the connectivity to your CPEC and through the peace sub-sea cables that you are taking to East Africa. All this is doable. Because Gwadar will at some stage become the hub. How soon is up to the Pakistani state and their government, what they do with it. But the Chinese have been very clever. They opened a base which they call the logistics support system or base in Djibouti. What they have done by that is, first of all, it has proximity to Gwadar. And second, earlier they had the problem in the Strait of Malacca. They could bypass that through the Eurasian landmass, their connectivity there. Now they will be able to now guard all their traffic, the commercial traffic coming through the Europe to the Indian Ocean region by keeping an eye of Strait of Hormuz and the Bab al-Mandeb. That's the key, this thing, node is there. So basically, the Pakistanis are on one side, the Chinese, Djibouti are there. In any case, you see, they've been doing long voyages since 2008 under the garb of anti-piracy operations. The Chinese naval ships, where they could test their endurance, where they could test the waters of the Indian Ocean region. They have done the hydrographic surveys of this ocean, and then they have a logistic base in Djibouti. So the point I'm making is, what I'm trying to say is very simple, that the Americans have always been focused on the military aspect. Although President Biden has spoken about something called Build Back and Better World, which is abbreviated as B3W. You see, the point of the matter is that who will pay the money, what will happen, nothing will happen, in my assessment. It will just remain acronym what it is. So everything then boils down to, this is my last point on the Americans I want to make, everything boils down to what they call the integrated deterrence. What is integrated deterrence? Integrated deterrence is what they are looking at, how to fight a future war with China. And this is also known as joint or domain operations. And this is where eventually all these Quad countries will fit in. And their strategic partners like India will fit in. So the operational part, let's put it like this, as far as Americans are concerned, they have an Indo-Pacific strategy. The policy guidelines or the centrality to that is provided by the Quad, and the operational aspect will be provided by the integrated deterrence. And AUKUS and 5G, everything converges into this. On the other hand, what the Chinese have is an entirely different security system based on cooperation, collaboration, and commercially outflanking the Americans and ensuring that the partnerships that they are creating in the various regions, they do not fructify. This I have given a very broad overview of where Quad, where the security architecture fits in. And I'm very happy to get in the discussion. Thank you.